story this summer when we were reading an article in Student Transportation News, and Dan was the keynote speaker at their summer conference. And we reached out to him because we realized his message is one that school districts across the nation really need to hear. And so just a little bit about Dan. He is a deputy at the Bonneville County Sheriff's Office in Idaho Falls, Idaho, where he and his wife Melissa are raising 5 children. Dan has delivered this presentation at multiple school districts and national conferences in hopes of raising awareness of how small changes to current student transportation programs have the potential to save lives. So Dan, without further ado, I'm going to let you present your presentation.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I want to thank those of you who are here. Everybody who's tuning in this morning. I want to thank everybody for being here. I really want to send out a thank you to the bus drivers and the people who are involved in student transportation. You guys have a phenomenal job that you do. You have a dauntless job. You're up early in the morning. You work late in the evening. You have goofy shifts. In my opinion, you guys are highly underappreciated and underpaid. I want to thank you. I heard recently a statistic that the airline industry serves about 8 million passengers a day throughout the U.S. Bus drivers transport about 25 million students per day on 500,000 buses. And you guys' safety record is better than the airline industry. And thank you for what you do. Thank you for getting our kids to school safe. A little about me. I've been in law enforcement. I started my career in 1998 in Colorado. Worked there for about 6.5 years. Worked in Wyoming for 6.5 years. Then now I'm in Idaho. Most of my career I've either been a patrol officer or a school resource officer. One of the schools that I worked with in Colorado, my oldest son was one of 3 second graders. It was him and 2 little girls. In Wyoming, my middle son had the opportunity to attend a one-room schoolhouse. It was a K-3 school, and it was him and about 6 other little kids. And after school, he would go home with one of the little neighbor girls, and they would bottle feed calves after school until I could stop by to pick them up. The main campus for that school was about 35 miles to the east of me and had about 400 kids. I now work as a deputy sheriff in eastern Idaho, and I'm currently assigned to the SRO division, or a juvenile detective. The school district that I'm assigned to has about 12,000 students. So I have a variety of experience working with schools and school districts, anywhere from about 100 K-12 up to 12,000. A little bit about my family. We're the Brady Bunch. I have 3 sons. My wife has 3 girls, and we were married back in 2009. Our kids are all in the same age range. They're all tied in together, just like the Brady Bunch was. The beautiful young lady there on the left with the black blouse on, that is Makayla. And today we're going to take an in-depth look at the events that happened on the evening of December 20th, 2011, when Makayla was killed getting off the school bus. We were living in Crowheart, Wyoming. Crowheart's kind of in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. We were about 90 miles from the east entrance of Teton National Park. So basically, I'm over in the Teton National Park, Yellowstone National Park area, just a little ways east of that area. This picture was taken from my driveway, looking southwest. From this picture, if I were to walk towards the moon, I could walk 50 miles without running into another house. My kids were attending the Wind River School District, which is in Pavilion, about 35 miles to the east. And again, there was the one-room satellite school, which was about 5 miles to the west. The district covers about 1,200 square miles and has about 400 students. So it's a pretty good-sized district. A lot of ground that they have to cover, and it's very rural. My kids would get on the bus at 7:15 in the morning and arrive at school at about 8 o'clock. So their bus ride was about 45 minutes. In the afternoon, they would leave the school at 4 o'clock and be home at about 4:45. Because we lived in such a rural area and it was such a large school district, land mass-wise, the school district also offered an activity bus for the kids who stayed after school for sports programs or for dances or for tutoring. And they called that the activity bus. The bus would leave the school at 6 o'clock, and they would drop my kids off 6:45, 6:50-ish, kind of depends on how many kids were on the bus and where all they needed to go. It was a modified route. It wasn't so there was a time frame when they would get home. Take notice in this picture, the tree right there on the right. I want you to take notice of that tree. So this is the morning of December 20th at about 7:30. My kids had just left for school about 15 minutes prior to this. We're coming up on Christmas vacation. This was a Tuesday. The kids would go to school on Wednesday, and then Wednesday afternoon is when Christmas vacation would start. My wife and I had purchased a new camera, so we'd take pictures of the kids for the holidays, and I decided I would take it out and go play with it. It was a pretty morning. There was frost on all the plants and all the fences, and it was just a really dense fog morning. The tree there on the left side is the same tree in the previous picture, so you can see there was a drastic difference in visibility that morning. It was pretty lousy weather that morning. The weather improved throughout the day. The fog went away. It got better. The kids had their usual day at school. A little before 4 o'clock, Melissa got a call from Makayla, and Makayla asked if she could go to the middle school holiday dance and then take the activity bus home. Melissa gave her permission to and told her I love you. Our kids were comfortable on the bus. They were comfortable with the bus drivers. It didn't matter if it was their regular bus driver or a substitute bus driver. Michaela was 11 years old. She was comfortable riding the activity bus by herself. They were very comfortable with our bus drivers and with the transportation. That afternoon, December 20th, my other kids, the other 5, came home at their regular time. They got off the bus. We had our usual evening routine of doing homework and having dinner. And it was about 6:50, and we had just finished cleaning up from dinner, doing the dinner dishes, and we heard the activity bus pull up. We could see out our front windows, and we could see the amber lights on the bus. This was common for us. We lived close enough to the highway where we could see when the bus pulled up. We could hear it pull up. We could see the lights going. We see it pull up. We see the amber lights on. We see the red lights kick on, and we know that Michaela's home. And while we're waiting for her, I hear a loud bang, and in my mind, I was trying to figure out what was that? What was that bang? And I was thinking it sounded kind of like a hood slamming, but what could that be on a bus? And was thinking maybe it was the stop arm smacking back against the bus after Michaela had crossed. And I'm just processing this, like that was a weird noise. Wonder what it was. And then soon after that, there was a knocking on the door. Pretty rapid knocking. And I hollered, "Hey, it's unlocked, Michaela," and started to walk over to the door to get it open for her. And the knocking continued and got more intense and more rapid. And when I opened the door, it was the neighbor boy. And he said, "Deputy Sperry, come quick. Michaela's been hit." I was pretty perplexed at that. That was about the last thing that I expected at that time. It took me a second to process that. I thought he at first said my dog had been hit. And I'm like, "No, my dogs are inside." And said, "No, it's Michaela's been hit." And so Melissa and I we grab our shoes and we run out there. And as we're running out our driveway, we get to the highway, and I can see Michaela's one of her shoes in the highway. I see her backpack laying there on the side of the highway. And the bus driver is walking back to the bus, and he says, "I'm sorry, Dan, she's dead." And we run and we find Makayla, and she's in a twisted pile in the weeds in the borrow pit. And we kneeled by her and we straightened her body out. And I double-checked for a pulse and breathing, and I ran back in and called 911. When I got there, I've been a deputy for going on 20 years now, approaching 20 years. I've worked tons of fatal crashes. And when I got to Makayla, she had a little bit of blood coming out of her nose, but her nose wasn't actively bleeding. There was no agonal breathing, and I recognized right away that she was deceased. Melissa pled with me to bring her back. I started doing CPR on Makayla. I've done CPR many times with my job. I've done it enough to know what it should feel like. And as I did the chest compressions, I could feel how much massive internal injuries there were on Makayla. I could tell that she was significant. There were significant injuries. And about the time I started doing CPR, a man walked up to us, or the man who hit her walked up to us. And think for a minute, if I'm sure you've said it, I've said it, if something ever happens to my kid, I'm going to kill the person who did that. And so here I am, I'm standing in a borrow pit in rural Wyoming with the man who just killed my daughter. And thankfully my police training kicked in. I told him to get back, and he started to walk back towards his vehicle. I began to follow him, and I asked him for his driver's license. And I tried to memorize the license plate on his truck, and he didn't give me his driver's license, but he assured me that he wasn't going to leave. I ran back. Where we lived, it was spotty cell service, and so I ran back and I grabbed the home phone, which was a cordless phone, and I called my neighbor, who was a deputy sheriff. He lived about a mile away from me. And I called him up, and I told him, I need some help at my house right away, and then hung up, and he came over at that time. After my brief conversation with the man who had hit her, I ran back to Melissa and Makayla and waited for emergency services to come. We were sitting in the borrow pit holding Makayla. I was looking to the east because I knew that's where my neighbor would be coming from. And as he got near, I could see that the lights were shining on the low ceiling, but this also showed me that there was no fog. That it was not foggy at the time. It wasn't heavily snowing at the time either. There were some light flurries, but it wasn't much. It was just a low ceiling. And this turned out to be a really important factor because I had to testify about the weather conditions at trial, and I could articulate why I knew what the weather conditions were. We sat in the grass with her and just held her, waiting for emergency services to come. And as we did this, the bus was still sitting there, and there were kids on the bus, and they had seen it. And the other deputy arrives, and he takes control of the situation, does some things, and allows the bus to continue the route, to continue to drop off the kids. It took quite a while for the first responders to arrive. We were rural. We were in a rural area, and we only had a volunteer fire department near us. The ambulance had to come out of Riverton, which was 45 miles to the east of us, 45 or 50 miles to the east of us. And so we had some volunteer first responders, and it took about 20 minutes for them to leave their ranches that they were at, get to our house. Melissa pleaded for them to do anything that they could, and so they put an oxygen mask on Makayla. And then after about 40 minutes, when the ambulance arrived, she was moved into the ambulance, and they hooked her up to a heart monitor and confirmed for Melissa that she was deceased. Almost every law enforcement agency in the area responded. The Highway Patrol, Wyoming Highway Patrol, conducted the investigation. And in their investigation, they showed that Makayla got off the bus, walked to the front of the bus, about 12 feet in front of the bus, on the right side of the shoulder, to the right of the fog line, waited for the driver to motion her across. The driver waved for her to cross the road. Makayla was about 18 inches from the fog line when she was struck. The driver stated that Makayla looked back at him and made eye contact just before she was struck. She came to rest about 128 feet from where she was hit. Cars these days are equipped with event data recorders, and the Wyoming Highway Patrol downloaded the event data recorder on the vehicle that struck her. She was struck by a full-size pickup. I believe it was a 1-ton Chevy truck. The event data recorder showed that the driver was driving 57 miles per hour. The speed limit in front of our house is 65 miles an hour, so he was doing a little bit under the speed limit. The truck's speed was constant. He wasn't accelerating or decelerating, and the brakes were not applied until after impact. They visited with the driver. He was not under the influence of alcohol or any other substance that they could determine. And upon completing the investigation that evening, they allowed him to drive his truck back home. That kind of bothered me. I wasn't surprised by it. Like I said, the troopers that were there, I knew them. They were friends of mine. I had dinner with them on different occasions. I had backed them on calls for service. We had backed each other. We had coffee together. We knew them. I knew that they were going to do a very good job, but it just kind of really sank. It sucked when they let him go and let him drive his truck home. They did a search warrant for phone records to see if he was on the telephone to try and determine what happened. Why did he not brake for the school bus? They were trying to determine if he was distracted. They interviewed him, and they asked him, did you see the school bus? And he gave a variety of answers. Yes, I saw it. No, I thought it was a snow plow. I thought it was a fire truck. I thought it was just a farm truck getting ready to turn. Yes, I did see the red stoplights, and just gave a lot of reasons. But just basically driving with his head up his rear was all that I've been able to figure out. He was just driving and just didn't realize it was a school bus, even though it was lit up appropriately. He never gave any real reasons why he didn't stop. It took a couple of weeks for Highway Patrol to get the search warrant, get the phone records back from the phone company, and for them to do their investigation and their reconstruction of the accident and stuff. And he was eventually charged with 4 misdemeanors and 1 felony. The charges were unsafe driving, driving too fast for conditions, passing a school bus, misdemeanor vehicular homicide, and aggravated vehicular homicide. In November of 2012, so almost 1 full year after, so 11 months after the accident, we finally go to trial. The defense argued driver error. And there was discussion on the bus that Makayla was on had a strobe light 2/3 of the way back. That strobe light was not on. And so there was discussion on whether or not the bus driver's procedure, whether he did things properly or not. The bus driver had to testify to his actions. when he turned on the amber lights, and when he turned on the red lights, when he allowed Makayla off the bus, and that he waved her across the road. To corroborate the testimony, they had to put 2 students that were on the bus on the stand to testify. One of these young men, I have actually the young man who testified, I have a huge amount of respect for. There will always be a special place in my heart for these guys. They one of them spent the evening at the dance dancing with Michaela and had a good time with her, was a friend of hers. He's also the young man who came knocking on my door telling me that she had been hit. And now he is on the stand in Michaela's homicide trial, standing up and testifying against the man who killed Michaela. Their courage is just phenomenal. And to think that he was 11 years old, maybe 12 years old when all this was going down, is just, he has my respect, and I will always respect him. The gentleman who hit her was convicted of passing a school bus, driving too fast for conditions, and the vehicular homicide. And he was sentenced to 300 days in jail. That was to begin at the end of January. So this is right before Thanksgiving when he's convicted. He goes home, spends holidays with his family, goes to jail end of January, spends most of the year, and then is back out before the next Thanksgiving. Michaela's classmates and 2 high school seniors set out to change the law. They contacted legislatures who listened to them. 2 of the seniors were invited to testify in front of the legislatures. And in March of 2013, because of the actions of these kids, the state of Wyoming signed a bill into law providing $5 million to retrofit every school bus in the state with cameras. Her class wanted to remember her by making Wyoming a safer place for every kid and making it easier for law enforcement to prosecute people who do not stop for the buses. These kids are the ones who made the bill happen. The young man with the gray and black tie in the middle is the young man who testified on the stand, the one who knocked on my door, and the one who spent the evening with Michaela. At the time of at the criminal trial, I was visiting with Michaela's bus driver, and on a couple of different occasions, he asked me, he told me that he never saw the truck coming. He said, I never saw him. I never saw him. He also asked if I knew when he might be released as a witness. He had been subpoenaed. He was a witness. He had to stay at the trial until he was released by both defense and prosecution. And he asked me this on a couple of occasions, and he told me, he says that he has a long drive home and didn't see well at night. And that really, that statement bothered me. He made it a couple of times in front of myself and other family members, and that didn't set well with me. We had been considering a civil trial, and this really began to eat at me. Our lawyers subpoenaed his medical records and learned that he had a vision problem called droopy eye and had been dealing with it for 5 years prior to the night of the crash. His condition was surgically corrected 8 months after Michaela's death. The photos, these are daytime photos of the accident scene. About half mile to the east, the road drops down. So it's relatively level. So there's a straight level approach from a half mile to the east. And from the west, you can see where it's nice and straight and level. It's a little over a mile. There were several reconstructions done on the accident. All show that the bus driver should have been able to see the traffic approach him for more than a full minute. The puzzle pieces began to fit together. The bus driver said he never saw the car coming and had a medical condition that obstructed his vision. And as I began to look into some things, I learned that the CDL manual in the state of Wyoming is actually the same CDL manual throughout every state. It's a federal document, and the states just they can make very minor tweaks to it, and they put their names on the front of it. Chapter 10 in every CDL manual throughout the U.S. discusses school buses and outlines best practices for student pickup and drop-offs. Many states have deviated from the original basic plan. The CDL manual suggests avoiding left side drop-offs and pickups and says that students that must cross a road should not be allowed off the bus until traffic is stopped. Then they wait 10 to 15 feet in front of the bus and wait for the driver to wave them across. The CDL manual continues that they then stop at the left front fender of the bus to allow the driver to triple check to make sure that it is clear before they cross over. Was this an avoidable death? Who was at fault? So, a quick little poll here for you guys. Nationally, how many vehicles do you think pass school buses in 180 day school year? Just click on it real quick, see what they. Tina, is this?
Dan, yep, we have it up, and we'll keep it up for about another 15 seconds or so for you guys to be able to vote. And your answer choices are 13,000, 130,000, 1.3 million, or 13 million. And we have about 75% of you have voted, 77% of you have voted, 82% of you have voted. Okay, we're going to go ahead and close it out now, and I'll launch this for you real quick so you can see what people are thinking. And what the results were is, in a full school year, how many vehicles do you think nationally pass school buses? 14% said 13 million, 43% said 1.3 million, 41% said 130,000, and 2% said 13,000. So Dan, I'm going to let you kind of continue your story, and I think people will be surprised by the actual number.
Great, thank you, Tina. Okay, so there are several organizations throughout the U.S. that do stop arm violations. And Tina, if we can get back to the PowerPoint here. I don't know if I need to click on things. Launch webinar again.
Click once, and then you should be able to take control again.
It's okay, here we go. I'm sorry, folks.
Technical difficulty. I just reassigned the mouse to you, so you should have mouse control again. You may need to click once with your mouse on the screen before the arrows will work.
Okay, I'm actually looking for the PowerPoint part. All I've got here is the results of the poll. So while we figure that out, there's in 2016, only 20% of the buses in the U.S., so about 100,000 buses participated in the, there we go. Awesome. Thank you, Tina. Okay, so here's a snapshot in time. 2016 survey. This is the National Association of State Directors of Transportation, National Association State Directors of Transportation, People Transportation Services. This is their survey. 96,540 school buses participated. There were 74,000 flybys for this particular one-day survey. 98% of the violations happened on the left side of the bus. I've read a couple of statistics, school transportation news with the State Directors Association there. They estimate that 13 million stop arm violations happen per year. That's a staggering number. If only one kid gets off the bus at each of those stops, that's 13 million potential deaths. But then we know that more than one kid gets off at the stop. Sometimes we have 10, 15 kids get off at a stop. And so that's a staggering statistic that 13 million cars fly by each year. So let's talk about the typical stop arm violation. A car passes the bus. The bus driver tries to memorize the license plate in the rearview mirror. They contact law enforcement, and law enforcement gives them a bad excuse about why they can't do much. I am guilty of that. I have done that several times. Some states, they require that the driver be able to identify actually identify the driver and give them a description or be able to tell them what he looked like. And so, and that's the card that I would play a lot. Well, can you identify the driver? Can you identify? No. Can you tell me whether it's a guy or a girl? No. All I have is the license plate. And it's I'm guilty of that, and I'm working on changing that in the law enforcement community as well. Let's talk about the definition of insanity. Repeatedly doing the same thing but expecting a different outcome. We repeatedly allow kids off the bus. We repeatedly stop the bus, put out the stop arm, and we expect cars to stop. And 13 million times a year, the cars do not stop. We're repeatedly doing the same thing but expecting a different outcome. I encourage you guys to keep reporting and tracking your flybys. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. Statistics are needed to help address issues. If you provide law enforcement with a date, time, and location and a license plate, they could solve a murder. They should be able to use that information to do a basic investigation to identify drivers who have passed a school bus. And again, here's my promise to you. I'm working to get this addressed in the law enforcement community as well. In the community that I work in, the state of Idaho has an affidavit that the driver fills out, and they provide the information, the date, time, location, and I actually hand that in with my citation. Thankfully, the district that I work with has cameras. The sister district right next to it does not. So I'm able to look at the video, and I'm able to see the license plate, and so I can look it up. I track down who the owner of the car is, and I go visit with them, and I do a basic interview to find out who is driving the car. And then if I can, and sometimes I have troubles finding the vehicle owner if their address on their driver's license is not current, if their address on the vehicle registration is not current, or they live too far out of my community. It can get difficult for me to track them down. But if I can track down and actually make contact with the person who owns the car, myself and the other deputies that I work with were very successful as to charging the offender on these. Again, they need law enforcement should need a date, time, and location license plate. It's a pretty basic investigation. Cameras on the buses. How do they help? A camera on Michaela's bus that night would not have prevented that accident. All it would have done is given us video evidence that the bus driver, when he turned on the lights, and would have given us video of Michaela being hit. About the most significant thing that it would have done in Michaela's incident is the kids who had to testify at her trial would not have had to testify. Cameras, they allow drivers to focus on the student's safety. Like I said, and I've talked with a lot of bus drivers, it's difficult to try and get that license plate of the car traveling the opposite direction in the mirror while you're trying to focus on the students as well. It's great evidence in court. It's hard to contest a video, and it's a good training aid. If you fail to train, you train to fail. Every year, bus drivers are required to do evacuation drills. Why don't we do flyby drills? Let's do some drills where we teach the kids what to do in case there's a flyby. Let's train these kids on how to be safe. I encourage you guys to review Chapter 10. Does your district have an emergency warning? Let's get in there and look at Chapter 10 of the CDL manual. It's the same, and it has guidelines for loading and unloading children. It has your state association varied significantly from that, so that are you endangering the kids' safety? We talked a little bit about what Chapter 10 requires, and we're going to watch a video. And this happened, I believe it's in Virginia. I'm not exactly certain, but we're going to watch it a couple times. And let's discuss what was done right, what was done wrong. So we see the bus driving. It's approaching the stop. You can see the brakes are applied, and he has the amber warning lights on. The stop arm is out. Cars are going by, and unfortunately there's no audio right now, but the driver is honking the horn. The kid goes out, and it's a narrow mess. And then he comes back by. So we're going to watch it again, and we'll pause through it and discuss some things. In my opinion, the amber lights, when they come on, they're in about the right spot. My concerns are cars are actively passing the bus with the stop arm out, and the driver's allowing them on. The horn is honking, and you can find this video on YouTube. I believe Tina has a link to it here in a second that she's going to talk about. But the kid is crossing the road while the bus driver is honking. The kid doesn't understand what the honking is about. The honking is actually distracting the kid, and the kid is looking up at the bus rather than on the road. If you guys have emergency signals, which I encourage that you guys do, make sure that they're the same throughout the district. Make sure that if you honk your horn, that the kids know to do one thing, but if they get on if they have a substitute driver and the substitute driver honks the horn, that they do the same, that the driver expects the kids to do the same. Okay, here's a little the reminder Tina threw in there.
Yeah, guys, we have a lot of people who use people that are on this call. And the one thing I just want to remind you is, if after today's call, if you reach out to Kathy, there's literally this clip is surrounded by some tips on best practices for helping train your students on bus safety. And so you may not be able to have your drivers watch this entire webinar in its entirety, but you can literally assign out this 1 minute and 48-second video to all the drivers just to remind them of the importance of bus stop safety. So Dan, back to you.
Thanks. Again, if you honk your horn, kids need to know what to do. Make sure the signal is universal throughout the district. If you have a safety concern, talk to your supervisor about it. Avoid left side pickups and drop-offs when possible. Again, the statistic is 98% of the stop arm the flybys are going to happen on the left side of the bus. Is there a way that we can keep kids from the left side of the bus? Your transportation supervisors, the supervisors out there, they have a pretty daunting job. They are not as familiar with your route as you are. The school district where my kids went to, they had my kids, my wife and I, well, more so myself, when I bought the house and I called the school district and I said I need to arrange for school buses to get my kids, and they told me what time the bus would be there and what time they would drop them up. You know, they're the professionals. They know what they're doing. This is how it's done. I didn't question that. My wife had concerns about our kids crossing a 65-mile-an-hour road, even though it's not a heavily traffic road. She just wasn't comfortable about it. Myself and her, we didn't follow up on it. There were things that I could have done that I did after the accident. I tore down some fence to make a complete roundabout in my driveway where there was plenty of room for the bus to pull completely off the highway so that my kids did not even need to be exposed to the highway. I understand that this is different with every state. The state of Idaho, that's not allowed. You know, they cannot do that. They cannot come on a private property unless there's a right-of-way filed with the state, which then makes that public property. So anybody can pull into that driveway and turn around. So every state's different, and thankfully the school district, after Michaela died, they allowed the bus to pull into my driveway, unload and unload our kids, just to put Melissa and I at ease. The route that we were on, we were relatively close to the end. Probably, if my kids would have stayed on the bus to the end of the route, the bus after the end of the route would go back eastbound and travel right past our house. My kids would have been on the bus for, I believe, an extra 15 minutes or so. So my kids would have had an hour-long bus drive. The school district wanted my kids to have the shortest ride possible, which I appreciate and I can understand and I agree with. However, looking back at it and looking at the big picture, is a shorter ride worth exposing my kids or any kids to the left side of the bus where we know that 98% of the danger is? That extra 15 minutes would have eliminated that danger for my kids. After the accident, it's my understanding that the school district went through and evaluated all of their stops and did what they could to eliminate left side drop-offs. They're working very hard to keep the kids safe now. Again, what can you guys control as drivers? 13 million stop arm violations per year. Can we control other drivers? No, we cannot. There's not enough cops out there to follow every single school bus around every stop, every route. I wish there was, but there's not. And even if there was, it doesn't mean that they're going to not fly by. Just this last week, I was following a school bus and I had a vehicle go right by, and I'm in a fully marked police car. So what can you control? Can you eliminate left side stops where possible? Can you think about your route? Can you make minor adjustments to your routes to keep the kids from having to cross the road? Wait until traffic is stopped before allowing kids off the bus. Keep the kids on the bus until traffic is stopped. For instance, that video that we watched, that's a key one there. That kid was almost hit if the driver would have kept him on the bus. We can expect people to fly by, so let's keep the kids on the bus until we know that they're stopped. Teach kids to wait at the right side of the road, the left front fender of the bus, just like in the CDL manual says. Take that time to triple check. Triple check before you check before you allow the kids off the bus. Check while they're waiting at the right shoulder. Check while they're at the left front fender. Triple check. You guys are transporting the most precious cargo we've got. Know your district policies. Review the CDL manual. There's other resources out there too. Vertical Lines Group has some good stuff on their site. NHTSA, their best practice guide, outstanding resources as well. Look and see, figure out how can we make it safer for our kids. Police yourself, and this is perhaps the hardest thing to do. I've done this training and I have met thousands and thousands of bus drivers since Michaela passed away. And the thing that strikes me with them is they are so dedicated to their job. They love their job. They love the kids on their route. Again, like I said, I think bus drivers are underappreciated and underpaid. School districts are struggling to have to fill their routes. They do not have enough drivers for the routes that they have. Buses are running at complete capacity. But do you need a day off? Are you sick? Are you healthy enough to be driving the bus? Are you really angry? Did you and your spouse have a fight and you're just not in the right mindset? Are you depressed? I was talking with a transportation supervisor over in Wyoming, and he was telling me about one of his drivers that came in and his dog had passed away the night before, and it was just an emotional mess. And he gave the driver the day off because he felt that he wanted, you guys are transporting the most precious cargo, and we got to have you guys on your A game.
And Dan, before we wrap up, first off, you've shared a lot of great information, and your personal story was powerful. I want to remind everybody that if you use the Safe People system, the webinar that Dan just shared with you, the story that he just shared with you, can be shared with all of your drivers in your district, other people within your district via the Safe People platform. You can literally ask our CSR Kathy to assign it out to anybody in your district that you want to see it, or put this webinar into the resource area where it can be watched. There are other videos within the system on this exact topic. We have the video we talked about earlier. It's 1 minute and 48 seconds. Again, it's just a quick video highlighting what Dan showed you earlier, the student who was nearly hit. And we encourage you, ask Kathy to assign that out to your drivers today, just to watch it. Again, less than 2 minutes, just a quick reminder. And then for those of you that are in the management side of student transportation, there are 2 webinars we've done that have some great ideas that take this topic a little bit further that you may want to ask Kathy to assign out to you or somebody on your management team to watch. And one is a webinar on Stop Armed Student Safety Program, and the other is on training students in bus safety. If you don't use our platform and you want access to these, reach out to Stephanie Wilcoxon or Howard King. They're the account executives for Safe People. They can set up a demo site where you can watch these and check them out as well. And so, Dan, one other thing that I want to share, and if anybody has questions for Dan, please feel free to do those, but I want to go back to the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration Best Practice Guide. If you didn't write this down, write this down. If you haven't been to that website, go to that website. There are things that different school districts are doing around bus stop safety. Pulaski County, which uses our platform, is featured on there. They actually, every school bus that they hire has 3 stop arms on it now, and studies are still out on that, but that's one of the things that they're doing to try to make a difference in school bus safety at the bus stop. And there are a lot of different ideas, policies. So this resource that Dan mentioned, I can't speak highly enough for that resource. And Dan, I didn't know it existed until your webinar today, so I thank you for sharing that. And I'm going to let you wrap this up and kind of close us out for the day.
Thank you, thank you. Guys, this is my contact information. I have, you can contact me at MakaylaStory@gmail. I do trainings, and not just on Makayla Story. I have some classes that I do where I come in and I talk about clothing trends and how to understand what kids are saying. Basically, how to interpret what they're not saying by looking at their clothing. Some of the clothing trends that we see out there. Talk about the stash pockets, where they're hiding their drugs, vape pens, and some of the drug stuff. I have classes that I've done for the Idaho Department of Transportation on dealing with difficult people in student management. Part of my job as a deputy sheriff is I'm a hostage negotiator, and so I bring in some of the stuff that I use as a hostage negotiator with the SWAT team, and give some of these skills to bus drivers so that you can use those as with your students or your parents, and then also discuss ways to keep your bus safer. And we look at some case history on some of the stuff that's happened to buses. I have a Facebook page. If you wouldn't mind, find me on Facebook. Here's the link to it. I post about every day. I post 1 or 2 articles from throughout the nation on different events, and I hope that through this that I want to show some positive things that bus drivers are doing when I'm able to find that on the news, and I'm also looking for, I post stuff about accidents that had happened. For instance, there was a 9-year-old girl that was drugged underneath her school bus and died earlier this week. And so that way we can see what's going on, and then maybe look at, okay, could that happen in my district? What do we need to do to make sure that this doesn't happen on my watch? We have a GoFundMe page. I do travel around a little bit. School districts are underfunded. Transportation is underfunded, and so this allows me to help get into some of the school districts and do trainings with them. Thank you so much for listening to Makayla's story. I appreciate being able to share that with the transportation specialists throughout the nation. Nothing that I can do will bring Makayla back, but I hope that by sharing her story that I can keep kids alive. About 15 kids are killed each year the same way that Makayla died. It's happened already a few times this school year. I would love to see that someday get down to 0. And I want to thank everybody for being here. So, Tina, do we have any questions that I can answer?
We don't have any questions that have come in, but Dan, I want to thank you again for taking the time out to share this story. We've had a lot of people write in and say thank you for sharing your time and your story, and that was very, very powerful. I think that the mission that you're on is phenomenal. I hope, and I think that everybody on here would echo the sentiments that you ended with, that we see that number at 0 one day. And so thank you. Thank Melissa for allowing you to share the story as well. And I just can't share with you all of the thank yous that have come in. And God bless you and your families, and thanks, and great story and appreciation that people have shared with us. Just in the comment, it's actually the only webinar I think I've ever seen where instead of questions, it's just full of thank yous and powerful message. So Dan, thank you very much, and hopefully if we can help you in any way continue sharing your training, we would absolutely love to, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.